Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venture Fuel Visionaries podcast. I'm your host, Fred Schonenberg. On today's show, we have George Sauter. George is an accomplished healthcare executive with decades of experience driving innovation in the industry. He is the former chief strategy officer at John Muir Health, and George has been at the forefront of integrating cutting-edge technologies into legacy health systems, forging impactful partnerships, and shaping strategies that improve patient care and operational efficiency. His expertise spans clinical transformation, strategic planning, and leveraging AI to enhance healthcare delivery. Today, we're going to dive a little bit into his journey, his insights on healthcare innovation, and his advice for any startups that are looking to make a meaningful impact on the dynamic industry of healthcare. So please join me in welcoming George Sauter to the show. George, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jack. Thanks for that warm introduction, warm welcome, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, so George, can you give us a little background? I gave a little tease there of your history, your career, and your journey thus far.
Sure. I'm originally an engineer. I worked for 4 years, went to business school. Out of business school, ended up working for a consulting firm that was servicing the services sector of the economy. And it turned out that services sector was largely healthcare, that 95% plus. And I gained a lot of experience in healthcare. And it was a tremendously exciting time in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where the healthcare industry was really moving from a cottage industry to one that was much more organized and structured. And it was exciting to be part of that transformation. I was a senior partner at ultimately the Chartis Group, and in 2014 had the opportunity to effectively go into in-house counsel, be the chief strategy officer for one of my favorite clients at John Muir Health, and a CEO, Cal Knight, who was a client of mine for well over 20 years. So, and then at John Muir Health, I was responsible for strategic planning, growth, service line development, marketing, communications, and what we called e-business or digital transformation and all things innovation.
I love that. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that moment as the chief strategy officer and some of the key challenges you faced as you started to transform that business into growth mode and introduce maybe new technologies and things like that?
Well, it's there were several. It is healthcare is it attracts, or it is, many of the leaders have grown up in the industry and tend to be risk averse, and the idea of failing fast is very foreign. And frankly, you don't want somebody to fail fast in the operating room when you're sitting there on the operating room table. So it's very natural.
Yeah.
But just I think we all understood that, and trying to figure out how to place innovation where you can fail fast and where you can, but still protect the patient and protect some of the investments that have been made in healthcare for all these years. It's a delicate balance.
It's such an interesting, the way you put it was, I've heard the theory a lot, but I thought you put it very nicely there, which was like, so many of the high-ranking officers, the executives in the organization had grown up in the industry. And I see that in almost every industry we work in is, the people that do really well, that help make the company really big, are the ones that end up making the decisions. And so you almost have like what got us here may actually be one of the challenges to get us there, right? Because you get really good at the thing you do, which of course requires such, not tunnel vision is the wrong word, but focus, that it's hard to then, take some risks in that space because your job has been eliminating risks. Did you find some of that, like, I don't mean it in a negative way from like a legacy thinking, but just like the reason that it became such a successful company was one of the things that made it hard to innovate?
Exactly right. And It's yeah, what was it? What got you there isn't going to get you the next step for sure. I think in healthcare too, there are, and this is when I advise startups, there are a whole host of issues that one needs to recognize to effectively sell into healthcare, particularly sell into innovation, sell
Yeah.
innovation into healthcare. There are real practical issues that you'll have to address and if not overcome, at least take into consideration. There's HIPAA and patient privacy issues that are very real. Albeit we probably have layered on some regulation that makes it even more onerous, but it's a real issue. There's a set of compliance issues that we need to deal with. Also, these are very large, complex organizations. A health system is it has many components, and we need to be able to fit within a lot of the legacy systems that are there. And it's easy to point to Epic or Sauter and say they're rigid, they won't let us in, but it's real. We've made huge investments, and somehow we have to fit our innovation within those legacy systems. There are also really narrow margins. So when a health system is dealing with narrow margins, the chief financial officer's office and others, that's like, okay, I know how to improve our margins. Just say no. The Nancy Reagan strategy. I'll date myself a little bit, and that's there. There's just little room for error. You can't. It's easy to get frustrated. I have been frustrated by that in the past, but those are real issues, and you have to respect them. And then finally, the organizational complexity is one that not many chief information officers are really thrilled that the chief strategy officer is running around doing innovation and introducing new technology into the organization. So that's about. In addition, there is that cultural aspect that we talked about, the risk aversion, typically of many of the leadership and the managers that you'll have to deal with. And then finally, turf battles, et cetera. Kind of I inferred that around the IT folks. It sounds imposing. It sounds impenetrable. It's not, but it is really important, particularly for these smaller companies or innovators that are trying to break into healthcare, to understand that. And I think even more, in addition to understanding it, respecting that. And these are not irrational. None of these issues are irrational. None of them are. It's easy to point and say, well, this person just doesn't want to take a risk. He or she is just, not worthy. That's not the case. There's really, these are all very rational human reactions.
It's so interesting. We work in different highly regulated industries, helping those large companies figure out how to work with startups and new technologies. And what's very interesting is the first thing we say to any startup is like, because the number one complaint, big corporates to startups, from the startups, is always the big company moves too quickly. They're too conservative. They're risk averse, right?
Yeah,
and it's
you move too slowly, you mean?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. We move too slowly. Right. Sorry. Excuse me. And it's like, yeah, but there's a reason why, right? They got big for a reason, and they have to protect that. And there are regulations and things like that. But I think what you said was really interesting, is like that they have to not only understand it, but also respect there's a reason for that. It doesn't mean they have to accept that things will go so slowly, right? But it's also like, hey, there's a reason for this. People do want to try new things in most cases, or at least your champions do, but figuring out how you can make sure the juice is worth the squeeze, right? So the CFO looks at it and goes, oh, this is worth some of them our small margin. And everyone else looks at it and goes, oh, you know what? I see how this might be 10x better than our existing system. And we can see the dream. You have to almost show them heaven and hell, right? At the same time. But I'm curious if you could share maybe an example of either a startup partnership or a technology that you were able to bring into whether it's patient care or some version of the healthcare system effectively.
Well, there's a couple that I'd like to highlight. At John Muir Health, one of the things I did over the last year or so, my tenure, is I helped bring in a AI-based scribe service into the organization very early on, and it was the solution was Ambience. There's others out there, but and the really where I try to focus on is, number one, they showed that they really understood many of these practical issues and respected them, number one. Number two, we identified a champion, or there clearly was a champion within the organization who was willing to stick her in this case her neck out, and take a chance at it. Third, we were able to frame the investment in, AI. What literally the senior management team and the board did not really know what that was. This is just when GPT was coming out, or was made public. And so we did a lot of education, but we also explained it's like, hey, let's start in an area that is a huge pain point in clinical documentation, of having our highest paid employees, so to speak, our physicians, spending hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day documenting. It's just crazy. That's nuts. Nobody thinks that's a good idea. In addition, nobody is, if the documentation, particularly in a clinical, a primary care office visit, isn't perfect, or a mistake is made, nobody's going to die. And so that's it. So okay, the risk there, the opportunity was tremendous. Everybody agreed. The risk was relatively low. Let's start there. And we, between that champion, and I think we really picked the right spot. And I elevated this to our strategic planning and marketing committee of the board. And actually, we kind of demoed things and just saw the just as a, hey, we're showing an opportunity, and the physicians and the board members in that meeting were just absolutely thrilled, and they say, wow, this is the first IT solution we've seen in healthcare that the physicians really want. And I literally was getting messages, direct messages during the presentation saying, what can I do to get in first in line here? I really, physicians, and they believe me, when there's an Epic upgrade, you don't get those kind of direct messages. So that was that. The lesson there was, pick your spot, find a place that you have a champion, and then the spot picking was really important in that we, potentially the high value without a lot of immediate, a lot of obvious downside and risk. And it was a smashing success.
I think it's really cool. And how much did you have to, obviously showing the physicians was genius, right? Because then they raise their hands and you're like, hey, by the way, I already have the people. You have the champion. I'm curious, my mind went back to your CFO, who's looking at this and maybe saying, yeah, but I have other proven things I can do over here that I know will incrementally drive more revenue. Were you pitching sort of like, hey, this is a low risk, low cost type thing. If it works, we'll go bigger. Like, were you kind of like, how are you showing I would say the jump shot to the moonshot potential of this thing?
It was because we were so early on with Ambience, we were able to ramp this up in some structured pilots program things, which our initial investment was quite low.
Yeah.
Number two, nothing in the pipeline had the promise to help our frontline physicians improve their work-life balance like that. And this was so much of a game changer. And you could see, I mean, we were early on to that. The AI scribes are now, I would say, probably more common than not within health systems across the country. It just made so much sense.
You'd mentioned another that maybe you had a couple examples. Is there another one that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I am a part of my role outside or post John Muir Health is I'm a I'm a part of the Berkeley Skydeck, a business advisor network, and Skydeck is one of the country's top startup incubator and accelerator programs. And as a business advisor, I'm available to help give advice to startups when the ones that are being funded by the program. And I choose to actually lean in and be a key advisor. We go through a speed dating program where the entrepreneurs and those who want to be key advisors, we interview each other in like 20 minutes for a day, and then at the end of the day, we say, yeah, I'd like to advise Fred, and Fred says, I'd love George to be my advisor. So each company gets 3 of those key advisors. So one of my companies was an organization called Roger Healthcare, which is they do AI Scribes, but they actually do it. They focus on home health. So wow, okay. And I said, wow, you picked, well, healthcare is a tough nut to crack from an innovation standpoint. Within healthcare, home health is probably the most regulated and backwards and stuck in the mud area, but it's brilliant, though it was because it was a really nice protected niche. So we, in my role, these folks typically would give me, can you introduce me to some home health providers? So okay, sure, let's. But I could waste your time and introduce you to a ton of ones that I just know are not going to take a chance. But there was a couple of these providers that I knew were kind of new and scrappy, and it was one in particular had a leader who was quite innovative, which is really rare in the home health space. I made that introduction, kind of got out of the way, and boom, the guy made his first sale, which was terrific. And it was really picking your spot, so important to find a champion who's, you have there's always so many hours in the day. So if you can really identify not just a decision maker, but a decision maker who's going to, who you think is going to take the chance and make a difference, it makes that was really important.
It's really interesting. I've mentioned this on the show before, but you just keyed into like how the name Venture Fuel came about. Was before I launched it, I met with the founder. I had nothing to do with this ecosystem. They were telling me about what their accelerator program was, and I was like, "Wait, they took all this equity from you?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "What did they get? You get in return?" He's like, "Well, it wasn't that big." I was like, "Hey, there's a better way to fuel your venture. You need to go get deals." And you need to have the right advisors that can open a door to get you that first enterprise deal. Because once you have that first one, then you raise money at a different valuation. Then you can get into the other, whatever the industry is. And so I love that. And I think, Berkeley Skydeck is awesome, and that they even think that way, and that you then helped cut through the noise. Because a lot of times people play a numbers game. Like, I'll introduce you to 30 people. It's like, no, man, I want the one. Like, give me the 2 or 3 that you think could be that champion, that force multiplier for me.
And I think, Fred, the most of the entrepreneurs really don't get that. I mean, they get it. They don't get it. They get it conceptually, but they often have great ideas, great technology, but they don't have a clue of how to introduce this to the industry. I mean, these startups are by nature very early stage. And often it's 2-3 people with a great idea and a nascent product. So really tough for them to do that.
Is there, one of the things we like to do on the show is have people they're focused in an area to share what they're excited about, like what's next. Are there startups that you've seen through Berkeley Skydeck or other parts of your exploration that have you excited about the future of healthcare or really any technology?
Wow, it is, in general, we turned down way. I mean, we have incredible number of applicants, and I think the acceptance rate, they like to say, is it's harder to get funded by Berkeley Skydeck than it is to get into Cal or Harvard. It's so the ones that we're funding now, it is some of the therapeutic technology and some of these these chemical or biotechnologies are really exciting. I'm working with one startup now that has a mesh and a compound within the mesh that enables muscle growth. The company's name is MuscleMatrix. The co-founders are senior level, department level chair professors, one at Berkeley, one at UVA, and which is a little unusual. That they're not 20-something-year-olds that are out there going at it, but for gunshot wounds, trauma, this compound in mesh can help promote muscle growth, muscle regrowth, which is really exciting. Of course, the Department of Defense is very interested in it, but what's interesting is they turn around and say, look, we're very interested, but to get to the next level, you need to have a plan to commercialize this as well.
Right.
So it's those kind of therapeutic. It's just, where do they come up with this is interesting. And then I guess the second area is just any application of not any, but the continued application and focused application of artificial intelligence and machine learning has such potential in healthcare. As I mentioned before, there's so much low-hanging fruit that does not put health systems or patients at risk with the application of AI. I think doctors, by and large, make incredibly valuable and accurate clinical decisions. Will AI help that ultimately? Yeah, probably. But I don't think that's not the burning. It's not the burning platform right now. My burning platform is that healthcare, like higher education, is really dependent on expert labor. Technology heretofore has not automated expert labor activities. The AI, I think, has the opportunity to do that in spades. Whether it's for example, a lot of, as I mentioned, AI scribes now are becoming commonplace within health systems. Well, the next step of scribing, which is really effectively clinical documentation, is coding. That could be done through using AI supported tools. Next step after that is, I need a referral and I need an authorization. There's countless hours are spent on the phone. This stuff is done on the phone and via fax between the provider and the insurance company, and sometimes the patient as well. All that can be done using AI-based tools, particularly if you build from a base of, in this particular case, the scribing and clinical documentation.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think what's interesting to me is, like, in our work that's kind of been in the pharmaceutical space, we started to dive into like electronic health records and the fragmentation of the industry. And it's just an insane problem. That's a data problem, right? Which is what AI is built to do. And so I think if you can free up your experts to do the things that experts want to do and what is their real value add, rather than chasing down the records or having incomplete records or having patients fill out 20 forms, right? Those kinds of things just feel like it's just so ripe for an easy fix. So I agree with you. And then you have the magic, right? The MuscleMatrix and those types of things, which is what everyone gets excited about, which is cool. So let me ask you this. We have 1 minute left. What advice would you have for somebody maybe that was stepping into that chief strategy role at a large or an emerging health system or any sort of industry within healthcare? How do they get innovation done, knowing the constraints that we talked about?
That's a really good question. I would say, number one, I do look for champions within your organizations, folks who are excited about the future and excited about innovation, and perhaps work with them. I actually set up a little ad hoc innovation committee, and got these folks together periodically just to review things that we've seen out in the marketplace and try to engage these folks. second is really look to see if you have frontline staff who are innovators. We at John Muir Health, we had 2 nurses who came up with this, a very seemingly simple idea, but it was a pad that was used on patient beds for particularly agitated patients. It replaced literally towels and tape that were being used and these two nurses ultimately left John Muir Health, and they are now full-time innovators and entrepreneurs in the healthcare space. So we identified these folks, highlighted those. I gave them time with our board and the strategic planning and marketing committee, the board, and it just celebrated that and say, hey, this is important for us. Yeah. And hopefully ultimately making innovation and is making innovation a requirement for the job, not something you would do on evening and weekends.
Yeah, I love it. It's so interesting that, there's so many innovators within the 4 walls. Even though we talked about the legacy system, there are champions within that can drive external innovation through the pipes and or be the ones with the ideas that have never thought of themselves as entrepreneurs, and how you monetize and commercialize that. It's a longer podcast discussion, yeah. But I love it. George, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us, and then also for everything you're doing to spark change. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Fred. It's been a pleasure.